So, ons gesels nou rugby vanoggend. Ons het Vrydag gesels met Skalkburger Senior, maar ons gesels vanoggend voormalige Springbok en skrywer Dugald Macdonald. En hy gesels oor sy boek JA-NEE, The Story Behind the Game. Good morning, Dugald.
Good morning, Andre. How
are we losing you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Are you fine?
Okay.
Great.
Yes, no, I'm good. How are you? Thanks very much for having me on.
Yes, Dugald, I read your book on the airplane, starting on the airplane yesterday. It was fascinating, and I was in Cape Town, so just the book starting there in Kalk Bay, and you know, and you in the shop, and you get this old huisgenote. But before we're going to get there, it's very interesting. We just first want to find out and to get to know you better. Dugald Macdonald. So just where were you born? Tell us a bit about your parents and school, and the era you lived in as a child.
Okay, I was born in Durban, and my father was an immigrant. Sorry, can you hear me, John?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. My father was an immigrant. He came out when he was about 16, and his father was born on the island of Iona, which is in the Hebrides, northwest, and one of the islands in the Hebrides in the northwest of Scotland. And he went to sea, and he decided that this was after the First World War, that South Africa offered more possibilities for his family. So he decided to come out here. And I'm quite, I don't think he had Loftus Versfeld in mind when he came, but that's the way it ended up. So I was actually born in Durban, where he arrived.
God, this is amazing. And I was fascinated with the era and the people you talk about, and the way you brought in the commentators, but still we're going to get there. Just your love for rugby, and for me, fascinating. You played this game for the Springboks number 8 in 1974, my birth year, and it was at Loftus, and it was a bad game, and it was fascinating the way you brought in history. And just a little bit of background about the history of that time, because the English and Afrikaans players, it feels like there was more English guys, and it was also, you said if you were at a certain game, I mean, and you were 70 years old at that game, you would have been part of the 1938 Groot Trek. But it feels there's a love for history as well. Did I sum that up correctly?
Yes, no, that's absolutely right. The title is JA-NEE, and the subtitle is The Story Beyond the Game. So obviously the main part of the game, the main part of the book is the actual game, the pre-commentary, first halftime, second half, and then a sort of epilogue afterwards. But that was the game. Then there's the context around the game. And when I mean that, growing up, dreaming about becoming a Springbok, the atmosphere in the camp of the day, etc. And then there's a wider context, because all of that falls into a social context. And of course, 1974 was a really, we were right in the middle of that, the problems on our borders with Renama and UNITA, and there was a really beleaguered sort of claustrophobic feel to the times, and I think that's what I try to do up front, is by describing the huisgenots of that period, because I used to look at that. My mother used to buy me the huisgenots because they had the sports album, and it was Mannetjies and Frick, and Davy and Hannes, and they were all up on my wall. I'd only read the news, read the huisgenoot when I was 70 years old. Actually read it, and if you go through those magazines, I call it Fries prose, if you go through the Huisgenots, as I describe in the book, you'll see that there's that whole flavor of fear, beleagueredness, etc.
And what motivated you to write this book nearly 50 years after the event?
Well, I think it's a very, very strong, very strong experience, a very powerful experience, and I think that's where your most vivid memories are created around those. So if I was going to write about everything, it would be something which was really, really powerful to me personally. And that game, it doesn't go away. I look at a rugby today and you see a Kolisi running out into Loftus in front of the Springboks. And, you look at it and you say, there is no way in a million years that we could have envisaged such a thing, So a lot of rugby you look at today and you're looking through it, the eyes of what you were like when you were 74, both on the field and off the field. And then the other part of it is that, that tour has been covered by limitless documentaries, biographies, autobiographies, all of which have been written by the British. Nobody has ever written the South African side of the story, And at the end of my prologue, I put there, let the vanquished write history, It's about sometimes somebody set the record straight here, because these guys weren't bloody paragons of virtue,
Mm. And then what I loved about the book is the way you brought in the commentaries of like Gerard de Villiers, Spiggerish, and even Kim Shippey, the BBC's Alan Williams. But it was very cleverly done, and especially explaining the Afrikaans words for an English audience, like Blättervat, and it's a fascinating read. But that was a very clever thing to do as well, because it brings back a lot of memories, even if you think about a Gerard de Villiers. Do you think there's ever been a guy like him again as a commentary?
Well, I don't think there was anything like him even then, I mean, there's no comparison if you think about, if you listen to the New Zealanders, Australians, the British, the French, there's just nobody comes close. I mean, one of the things was that he had going for him was that he was speaking to you had to be Afrikaans speaking. So, the Kim Shippey, he was broadcasting to New Zealand and to the UK. So you had to watch what he said, whereas Gerard was talking to his friend, his mates. It was a dialogue. And he came into and he was a storyteller. He was a great storyteller. And he used to dress up these promises as questions. So he would say, will experience make the difference today, And he asked the question and he doesn't answer it, but you have to hang in there and listen. And that if you listen, then that question is going to be answered, And then he had, he had his own expressions, which were absolutely unique to him. And part of the enjoyment of the book was, I like Afrikaans and I like languages and I like words, was how he made words his own, spooking for possession, There's one there which is hoofas. I don't know if you saw that. But he turns it into a noun, a verb into a noun, to describe the British, the Lions' control in the scrums. That was an existential state of hoofas, So he's brilliant he says everybody accused him of partijdigheid, but he said, nonsense, man.
He's just
How am
passionate.
I supposed to feel when the green bell come on, you know?
Yes. Dugald, I'm going to stop you there, but we're going to chat just after the 7 o'clock news. I want to find out about myths of the Springbok rugby, the jersey, theories about the badge, so just stay where you are. Ons gesels verder 'n bietjie rugby en ons gesels oor die boek JA-NEE, The Story Beyond the Game, geskryf deur Dugald Macdonald. En hy was 'n Springbok nommer 8 wat een toets gespeel het en dit was die legendariese slegte game vir ons in 1974 teen die Britse Lions. Ons het verloor die Springbokke 28-9 by Loftus Versveld. Welcome back, Dugald.
Thanks a lot. I like what you said about sustainability of diets there.
Oh,
Couldn't agree more.
thank you so much. Listen, I want to find out, you played one Springbok game, 1974, but people must just remember that you played rugby in Italy, you played for Oxford University after that, you played 3 years in France. But was it a disappointment? It was exciting, playing one game, at least being called up at 24, but was it a disappointment that it didn't go on after that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the circumstances were really difficult. I mean, the Springboks lost the first test, and the selectors made 7 changes, I think, for the second test. So, you know, there was a huge reaction to that. And in fact, when they read my name on the radio, they described me as an unexplained selection. So instead of being a Springbok, I was an unexplained selection. So we all went to Pretoria, and there was a really beleaguered, the Lions hadn't lost yet. And as Gerard Verveer says, it was the belangrikste game. And, you know, what's going to happen if we lose? Really dramatic stuff, you know. So the actual experience of becoming a Springbok and the preparation for the game, I don't think could have been worse. There are all sort of stories handed down about not being able to read the newspapers and staying in a jail. And we practiced in a police headquarters somewhere out in the country there. So, you know, the stories have grown over the years, but what does remain is the real, you know, the anxiety that surrounded the build-up to the test. And, you know, that translated into a really bizarre game. And as I explained, it's difficult to find an explanation of why they were very good, but why it was that bad. So that was my first test, and it couldn't have gone worse. But still, as they say, I've got the jersey.
Yes, that is the most important. And you've got a fascinating story about the jersey, because that is any boy's dream, if you love rugby, is that first moment you pull that jersey over your head. And it was a bit of a disappointment, but because you want to do it just before the game, but then there's a photo. Just tell us a bit of that story.
Yeah, writing about the Springboks was really one of the nicest parts, because I sort of, in a way, tapped into that whole youthful feeling and desire to wear the jersey, you know, and have that Springbok on your heart. And I write those bits in quite a sort of impressionistic, atmospheric sort of way, and that was probably the most enjoyable writing that I had in the book, because it was about an obsession which had been very, very real, you know, and I got to those feelings. But the incident you were talking about was, in my mind, I thought, well, you walked into a changing room and they gave you your jersey and you pulled it out and you ran onto the field, you know. But I was reserved for the first test. And to my horror, I discovered, and so I discovered they gave me a Springbok jersey and they said, put it on, we're going to have a photograph. And I was absolutely stunned. I didn't want to wear it, you know, but I couldn't get out of the photograph. I wanted to wear it only when I'd been chosen to wear it. So I say there that I put my Springbok jersey on for the first time at the President Hotel in Sea Point, you know, in the middle of a classic midwinter cold front, you know. And then worse came because I had to wear it underneath my tracksuit as a reserve up in the stand, you know. But then it came down to the day in the changing room. So I redefined the moment and said it's not the first time you pull a Springbok jersey on. It's the moment when you pull it on in the changing room and you run onto the field. So that's the moment redefined.
And then you live in Cape Town, so I just want to find out, do you support the Stormers? Or the Sharks?
Why are you smiling?
Because you were born in Durban, so I don't want to find out if you changed.
No. My family came down to Cape Town when I was 3 years old.
Oh, okay.
So I'm grown up here. I played for Western Province. So we've been cheated out of these last couple of games, but in our days there was the whole north-south thing, and it hasn't stopped. And we're miles better than anybody else.
Oh, miles and miles. Yeah, I missed that one. I was talking about playing in Italy and missing that you played for Western Province for 72 or 74. I thought you just did it for the money. No, I'm just joking. So tell me about, just as to end this, because I want to motivate people to read your story and get the book, JA-NEE. But you went on a rowing trip, 5,000 kilometers across the Atlantic in 4 years later, or 2001, and then tracked to the North Magnetic Pole. Just that trip, what motivated you to go and row 5,000 kilometers?
Well, I was on a rugby tour, Cape Town University rugby tour, and one evening we had a couple of beers, the guy who I was staying with, and we had heard about this guy, Tom McLean, who had rowed the Atlantic in 1966, I think. And we made this bet that one day, Plan X, we called it, one day we'd row the Atlantic together,
Sure.
So eventually in 2001, when I was 51 and he was 55, we got our act together and we rowed from Tenerife, which is up in the Canary Islands, to Barbados in the Caribbean. So it was 5,000 kilometers. And it took us 2.5 months to do 76 days, I think it was, yeah. So I think you should stay in the studio and don't get any strange ideas about that.
Definitely, no bettings here. Dugald, last question. Who's the best?
No bait either.
Say again?
I say they weren't very, the on baits on the ocean weren't too good either.
Yeah, no. I'm going to throw that on bait to the fishes. With seasickness. Last question, Dugald, the best rugby player you've ever seen or played against? Who's the best?
I prefer that to keep it to people, players that I've seen, because then otherwise you can get lost in this debate. But the best player I ever played against was a Welshman by the name of Gerald Davies, TGR Davies. He didn't come in 74. So he's not that well known to South Africans, but he could have made that tour. I think he didn't come for reasons of conscience, but he was he was a right wing, and just the most balanced, beautiful, fast runner with the most devastating jink and sidestep, and it really was poetry in motion. He was just a really, he would, he's the type of guy that you would go to the ground just to look at, and anything was, your whole energy levels lifted when you saw him off on one of his runs,
Dugald, we're out of time here, but thank you for your chat. I'm going to motivate people to get your book. And definitely not going to row, but thank you. Enjoy Cape Town, and it was amazing chatting to you.
Yes, no, thanks very much, and you're a great interviewer because you know how to leave some spaces and ask decent good questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. En dit was Dugald Macdonald en die boek is JA-NEE, The Story Behind the Game. Veral as jy daai era ook kom, weet jy, die kommentators is baie goed geskryf en dit gaan jou baie nostalgies maak. So maak seker, jy gaan kyk dit en as dit nou by rugby spelers kom, ek gaan kyk net vir Brian Abana al die jare. Kom ons gaan groei.